Video number 12 for Fablehaven. The sun had not yet risen far above the horizon as Seth and Dale walked along the rutted lane that ran away from the barn. Seth had never particularly noticed the weedy cart track. See, she starts chewing on her bone right when I start reading. The lane began on the far side of the barn and led into the woods. After meandering for some time beneath the trees, the track continued across an expansive meadow. Overhead, only a few wispy clouds interrupted the bright blue sky. Dale walked briskly, forcing Seth to hustle in order to keep up. Seth was already getting sweaty. The warm day promised to be hot by noon. Seth kept watching for interesting creatures. He spotted birds, squirrels, and rabbits in the meadow, but saw nothing supernatural. Where are all the magical animals? Seth asked. This is the calm before the storm, Dale said. I expect most of them are resting up for tonight. What sort of monsters will be out tonight? Stand warned that you might try to pry information out of me. Best not to be so curious about those kinds of things. Not telling me is what makes me curious. It's for your own good, Dale said. Part of the idea is that telling you might make you scared. The other part is that telling you might make you even more curious. If you tell me, I promise I'll stop being curious, Dale shook his head. What makes you think you can keep that promise? I can't possibly get more curious than I already am. Not knowing anything is the hardest. Well, fact of the matter is, I can't give a very satisfying answer to your question. Have I seen strange things, frightening things in my time here? You bet. Not just on festival nights. Have I stolen a peek out the window on a festival night? A time or two, sure. But I learned to quit looking. People aren't meant to have things like that in their minds. Makes it hard to sleep. I don't look anymore. Neither does Lena. Neither does your grandfather. Neither does your grandmother. And we're adults. What did you see? How about we change the subject? You're killing me. I have to know. Dale stopped and faced him. Seth, you only think you want to know. It seems harmless to know, walking under a clear blue sky on a fine morning with a friend. But what about tonight? Alone in your room in the dark, when the night outside is full of unnatural sounds. You might regret me putting a face to what is wailing outside the window. Seth swallowed. He looked up at Dale, eyes wide. What kind of face? Let's leave it at this. To this day, when I'm out and about after dark, I am sorry I looked. When you're a few years older, a day will come when your grandfather will give you an opportunity to look out the window on a festival night. If you start feeling inquisitive, postpone your curiosity until that moment. If it were me, if I could go back, I'd skip looking altogether. Easy to say after you've looked, not easy to say. I paid a heavy price to say it, many sleepless nights. What can be so bad? I can imagine some scary things. Oh, pause. Do you hear that? I'm going to make dinner. Give me a second. Alexa, set a timer for 21 minutes.
21 minutes, starting now.
Oh, where was I? I thought the same thing. I failed to appreciate that imagining and seeing are two very different things. If you've already looked, why not look again? I don't want to see anything else again. I'd rather just guess at the rest. Dale started walking again. I still want to know, Seth said. Smart people learn from their mistakes, but the real sharp ones learn from the mistakes of others. Don't pout. You're about to see something impressive, and it will not give you nightmares. What? See where the road goes over that rise? Yeah. The surprise is on the far side. You're sure? Positive. Better not be a fairy, Seth said. What's the matter with fairies? I've already seen about 1 billion of them, and also they turned me into a walrus. It's not a fairy. It's not like a waterfall or something? Seth asked suspiciously. No, you'll like it. Good, because you're getting my hopes up. Is it dangerous? It could be, but we should be safe. Let's hurry. Seth dashed up the rise. He glanced back at Dale, who continued walking. Not a great sign. If the surprise were dangerous, Dale would not want him running ahead. At the top of the rise, Seth halted, staring down the gentle slope on the far side. Not 100 yards away, a huge creature was wading through a hayfield, wielding a pair of gigantic scythes. The hulking figure slashed down wide swaths of alfalfa at a relentless pace, both scythes hissing and chiming without pause. Dale joined Seth atop the rise. What is it? Seth asked. Our golem, Hugo. Come see. Dale left the cart track and started across the field toward the toiling Goliath. What's a golem? Seth asked, trailing after him. Watch. Dale raised his voice. Hugo, halt! The scythes stopped cutting in mid-stroke. Hugo, come! The Herculean mower turned and jogged toward them with long, loping strides. Seth could feel the ground vibrate as Hugo approached. Still clutching the scythes, the massive golem came to a halt in front of Dale, looming over him. He's made of dirt? Seth asked. Soil, clay, and stone, Dale said. Granted, the semblance of life by a powerful enchanter. Hugo was donated to the preserve a couple 100 years ago. How tall is he? Over 9 feet tall when he stands up straight. Mostly he slouches closer to 8. Seth gawked at the behemoth. In form, he looked more ape-like than human. Aside from his impressive height, Hugo was broad, with thick limbs and disproportionately large hands and feet. Tufts of grass and the occasional dandelion sprouted from his earthen body. He had an oblong head with a square jaw. Crude features resembled nose, mouth, and ears. The eyes were a pair of vacant hollows beneath a jutting brow. Can he talk? No, he tries to sing. Hugo, sing us a song. The wide mouth began to open and close, and out rumbled a series of gravelly roars, some long, some short, none of them bearing much resemblance to music. Hugo cocked his head back and forth, as if swaying to the melody. Seth tried to stifle his laughter. Hugo, stop singing. The golem fell silent. He isn't very good, Seth said. About as musical as a landslide. Does it embarrass him? He doesn't think like we do. Doesn't get happy or sad or angry or bored. He's like a robot. Hugo just obeys commands. Can I tell him to do stuff? If I order him to obey you, Dale said, otherwise he just listens to me, Lena, and your grandparents. What else can he do? He understands a lot. He performs all sorts of manual labor. It would take quite a team to match all the work he does around here. Hugo never sleeps. If you leave him with a list of chores, he'll labor through the night. I want to tell him to do something. Hugo, put down the scythes, said Dale. The golem set the scythes on the ground. Hugo, this is Seth. Hugo will obey Seth's next command. Now, asked Seth, say his name first, so he knows you're addressing him. Hugo, do a cartwheel. Hugo held out his palms and shrugged. He doesn't know what you mean, Dale said. Can you do a cartwheel? Yeah. Hugo, Seth is going to show you a cartwheel. Seth put up his hands, lunged sideways, and did a cartwheel with sloppy form. Hugo, Dale said, obey Seth's next command. Hugo, do a cartwheel. The golem raised his arms, lurched to one side, and completed an awkward cartwheel. The ground trembled. Pretty good for a first try, Seth said. He duplicated yours. When you do a cartwheel, Hugo, when you do a cartwheel, keep your body straighter and aligned on a single plane, like a wheel turning. Hugo, do a cartwheel. This time, Hugo executed a nearly perfect cartwheel. His hands left prints in the field. He learns fast, Seth exclaimed. anything physical, leastways. Dale put his hands on his hips. I'm sick of walking. What do you say we let Hugo take us to our next stop? Really? If you'd rather walk, we can always... No way! Kendra used a hacksaw to separate another pumpkin from the vine. Further down the long trough of soil, Lena was cutting a large red one. Nearly half the greenhouse was devoted to pumpkins, big and small, white, yellow, orange, red, and green. They arrived at the greenhouse by a faint trail through the woods. Aside from the pumpkins and plants, the glass structure contained a generator to power the lights and the climate control. We really have to cut 300? Kendra asked. Just be glad you don't have to load them, Lena said. Who does? It's a surprise. Who do you guys think it's going to be? Are jack-o'-lanterns really such a big deal? Do they work? Quite well, especially if we can convince the fairies to fill them with magic. To dwell in them for the night, explained Lena. Fairy lanterns have long been among the surest protection from creatures with dubious intentions. But I thought the house was already safe. Kendra began sawing the stem of a tall, orange pumpkin. Redundancies in security are wise on festival nights, particularly on a midsummer eve, after all the recent commotion. How will we ever carve all of them before tonight? Leave that to Dale. He could carve them all himself with time to spare. Not always the most artful renderings, but the man can mass produce. You carve only for fun. He knows how to carve for need. I've never really liked pulling out the guts, said Kendra. Really? Lena said, I love the slimy texture. Getting greasy up to my elbows, like playing in the mud. We'll have delicious pies afterward. Is this white one too small? Maybe save it for autumn. Do you think the fairies will come? Hard to say, Lena admitted. Some for sure. Normally, we have no trouble filling as many lanterns as we care to carve. But tonight might be an exception. What if they don't show up? Kendra asked. We'll be fine. Artificial lighting works. Not as well as fairies. With the fairy lanterns, the commotion stays farther from the house. In addition, Stan will be putting out tribal masks, herbs, and other safeguards. You'll hear plenty of Is the night really so awful? You'll hear plenty of disturbing noises. Lena shook her head, not lifting her eyes from her work. Some of the most insidious tricks employed tonight will involve artifice, and illusion. Without the milk, you could be even more susceptible. It would only broaden their ability to mask their true appearance. Kendra severed another pumpkin. Either way, I won't be looking. I wish we could transplant some of your common sense to your brother. After all that's happened, I'm sure he'll behave tonight. What do you think? The door to the greenhouse opened, and Dale poked his head in. Kendra, come here. I want you to meet somebody. Kendra walked to the door with Lena behind her. In the doorway, Kendra paused and let out a small shriek. A bulky creature with a simian build was marching toward the greenhouse, pulling a rickshaw-type contraption the size of a wagon. What is it? He's Hugo, Seth crowed from inside the handcart. He's a robot made of dirt. He jumped out of the cart and ran over to Kendra. I ran ahead so you could see him approach, Dale said. Hugo can run really fast when you tell him to, Seth gushed. Dale let me give him orders and he obeyed everything I said. See? He's waiting for instructions. Hugo stood motionless beside the greenhouse, still holding the rickshaw. Had she not just seen Hugo moving, Kendra would have assumed he was a crude statue. Seth shouldered past Kendra into the greenhouse. What is he? Kendra asked Lena. A golem, she replied. Animated matter, granted rudimentary intelligence. He does most of the heavy labor around here. He's loading the pumpkins and rolling them to the house in the cart. Seth exited the greenhouse, toting a fairly large pumpkin. Can I show her a command, he asked. Sure, Dale said. Hugo, obey the next command from Seth. Holding the pumpkin at his waist with both hands, leaning back a bit to stay balanced, Seth approached the golem. Hugo, take this pumpkin and throw it as far as you can into the woods. The inert golem sprang to life. Grasping the pumpkin in one massive hand, he twisted and then fiercely uncoiled, hurling the pumpkin into the sky like a discus. Dale whistled softly as the pumpkin shrank into the distance, finally dropping out of sight, an orange speck vanishing behind far-off treetops. Did you see that? Seth cried. He's better than a water balloon launcher. A regular catapult, Dale murmured. Very impressive, Lena agreed dryly. Forgive me if I hope to put a few of our pumpkins to more practical use. You boys come help us cut the rest of our harvest so we can get them loaded. Can't Hugo do a few more tricks? Seth begged. He knows cartwheels. There will be time for nonsense later, Lena assured him. We need to finish our preparations for this evening. Dare I start the next chapter? Midsummer Eve, chapter 10. Grandpa prodded the logs in the fireplace with a poker. A shower of sparks swirled up the chimney as one log split open, revealing an interior of glowing embers. Dale poured himself a cup of steaming coffee, adding 3 spoonfuls of sugar. Lena peered out the window through the blinds. The sun will reach the horizon in moments, she announced. Kendra sat beside Seth on the sofa, watching Grandpa stoke the fire. The preparations were all in place. The entrances to the house were crowded with jack-o'-lanterns. Lena had been right. Dale had carved more than 200 of them. Not quite 30 fairies had reported for duty. Many fewer than Grandpa had expected, even given the recently strained relations. Thanks, Seth. 8 of the fairy lanterns were placed on the roof outside the attic, 4 at each window. Glow sticks illuminated most of the pumpkins, 2 in each. Grandpa Sorensen apparently ordered them in bulk. Will it start right when the sun goes down? Seth asked. Things won't really get going until twilight fades, Grandpa said, setting the poker beside the other fire irons. But the hour has come for you children to retire to your room. I want to stay up with you, Seth said. The attic bedroom is the safest place in the house, Grandpa said. Why don't we all stay in the attic? Kendra asked. Grandpa shook his head. The spells that make the attic impenetrable function only if it is occupied by children. Without children or with adults in the room, the barriers become ineffectual. Isn't the whole house supposed to be safe? Kendra asked. I believe so, but on an enchanted preserve, nothing is ever certain. I am concerned by the scant number of fairies who reported this afternoon. I worry this could be a particularly uproarious Midsummer Eve, perhaps the worst since I've lived here. A long, mournful howl underscored his statement. The disturbing call was answered by a stronger howl, closer, that ended with a cackle. Chills tingled behind Kendra's shoulders. The sun is gone, Lena reported from the window. She squinted, then put a hand to her mouth. Closing the slat, she stepped away from the blinds. They're already entering the yard. That's a good place to stop.